You think you know World War I? Trenches, mud, artillery? The images are burned into history, but there's a darker truth nobody talks about, the part that happened after sunset, when generals sent men crawling through barbed wire with blackened faces and medieval weapons, when the killing got personal, clubs with nails hammered through wood, knives designed to punch through ribs, bare hands around throats in the dark. This is the horror of night trench raids, the silent slaughter that turned the Western Front into a hunting ground after midnight. November 3rd, 1917, 2:30 in the morning, near Ericourt in France. American soldiers of the 1st Division are holding a position called the Artois Strong Point. 20 men in the S Trench, 15 more scattered in guard posts 100 yards forward. They're new to this. Most have been at the front less than a month. Then, German artillery opens up a mile to the southeast. Standard harassment fire. Nothing unusual. The Americans don't know this barrage is a setup, while shells are falling in the wrong place. A specialized German assault company with combat engineers is crawling through no man's land straight toward them, cutting paths through French wire with hand tools, moving in complete silence. The barrage shifts south, 3 minutes of darkness. The engineers blow gaps in the wire with explosive charges. German trench raiders pour through near the junction of two trenches. They hit fast. A sentry in Boyau Nord trench dies without making a sound. Raiders with clubs and knives sweep into S trench. Americans try to fight back, but the surprise is total. The Germans capture a dozen men, kill 2 more, 5 minutes. That's how long the raid lasts. 5 minutes of close quarters butchery in the dark. The raiders drag their prisoners back through the wire before Allied artillery can respond. Corporal James Gresham, Private Thomas Enright, Private Merle Hay, all 3 dead. They'd volunteered for service. Gresham and Enright had served under General Pershing before America even entered the war. Now they're the first American combat deaths on the Western Front. Their funeral happens the next day. The commander of the French 18th Division says they traveled far to defend justice and liberty. He doesn't mention how they died. Throats cut, skulls caved in, bodies left in the trench while their friends were dragged away screaming. If you value documented military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual using sources from the American Battle Monuments Commission's official documentation, published March 4th, 2025, and the Imperial War Museum's extensive trench raid archives, including first-hand soldier testimonies collected throughout the war and preserved in their digital collections. These aren't secondary sources. These are military records, war diaries, and voices of men who lived through it. Now back to the information. The trench raid isn't some footnote. It's a systematic campaign of terror that runs from late 1914 all the way to 1918. The distance between trenches varies wildly. At Zonnebeke, British and German positions are 7 yards apart. 7 yards. You can hear the enemy breathing. At Cambrai, it stretches to 500 yards. Most sectors average 250 yards of no man's land. That's the killing floor, cratered by shells, tangled with barbed wire, littered with bodies nobody can recover. At night, it becomes a hunting ground. The first small-scale British raids happen in November 1914, when the Indian Corps launches local attacks. But it's the Canadians who turn raiding into an art form. February 28, 1915, near Ypres in Belgium, 100 men from the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry Stage, what's recognized as the first organized trench raid of the war. They destroy 30 yards of German trenches, 5 killed, 11 wounded. The British, French, and Germans have never seen anything like it. Nobody's conducting small-scale operations between major offensives. It's either mass attack or nothing. Lieutenant Colonel Victor Odlum of the 7th Battalion refines the technique. November 1915, Odlum takes 170 volunteers on a carefully planned raid. They catch the Germans completely off guard, take several prisoners, suffer only 2 casualties. The High Command loves it. More raids, every night. Keep the enemy scared, keep your men aggressive. The Canadians build a reputation for ferocity that spreads up and down the Western Front. But there's a cost nobody wants to talk about. November 16th, 1915. Petite Douve Farm near the Douve River. The Canadians are planning a major double raid. 5th and 7th Battalions, 5 officers and 85 volunteers from the 7th, similar numbers from the 5th. They train for 10 days, select every man personally. Remove all identifying marks from uniforms. No Canadian equipment, nothing that can identify them if they're captured. Rain swells the Douve River to 3 times its normal width, 10 feet deep instead of 3. The raid gets postponed. Next night, the moon's almost full. They wait until it sets. 2:30 in the morning on the 17th, 2 groups creep forward. The 5th Battalion hits trouble immediately. Their men get tangled in wire, placed in a water-filled moat at the base of the German parapet. They're stuck, can't cross, can't get around it. Germans open fire. The raiders throw grenades and pull back. Somehow nobody dies. Not one casualty. Meanwhile, the 7th Battalion reaches its objective. German sentries have taken cover from the rain that's starting to fall. No resistance. Canadian blocking parties wire the flanks. For 20 minutes, they work through German positions. Kill or wound an estimated 30 Germans. Capture 12 prisoners, including new rubber gas masks that intelligence officers prize. They salvage most of their equipment, including portable bridges they'd carried across. German reserves counterattack 40 minutes later. Canadian artillery drives them off. The 7th Battalion's only casualties are one man accidentally shot and one slightly wounded. The success gets credited to thorough reconnaissance, careful personnel selection, explicit orders, and excellent coordination. But the 5th Battalion got lucky. Tangled in wire under fire and nobody died. That's not skill, that's chance. And chance runs out. The weapons tell you everything about what these raids really are. This isn't modern warfare. It's medieval slaughter with 20th century logistics. Standard issue rifles are too long for trench fighting, too loud for stealth, so raiders carry specialized killing tools. Trench clubs are the simplest. Wooden shafts with metal heads, some look like police batons. Others are medieval maces, flanged rings, spikes, hobnails, horseshoe nails hammered through wood. Soldiers use entrenching tool handles as bases and attach metal embellishments. Add a leather wrist strap so you don't lose it when it's slick with blood. British versions sometimes use flanged metal rings from decommissioned machinery. Looks like a gear from a tank. Canadians and British troops call them knob carries. The clubs are made in bulk by regimental carpenters and metalworkers behind the lines. Every battalion has men whose job is manufacturing weapons for killing quietly. Knives are worse. The French developed the poignard bayonet Level M 1886/14, a stiletto approved as standard military issue. The French army has such desperate need for these, they demobilize cutlery workers and send them back to factories to make knives for the front. The blade is long, needle-pointed, designed to punch through heavy coats and slide between ribs. Germans carry the Nahkampfmesser, close combat knife, slab wooden grips, metal sheaths, sturdy and simple, 6-inch blade, single-edged with a false top edge. When the French start using their nail stilettos, Germans begin converting steel stakes from barbed wire into improvised stabbing weapons. British and Commonwealth forces use weapons similar to Bowie knives. They also issue push daggers, T-handled blades gripped so the blade protrudes between index and middle finger, designed for close-quarter stabbing. Robbins of Dudley in England produces one of the first and most popular commercial push daggers. British soldiers buy them privately because the army doesn't issue enough. Americans get the M1917 trench knife, less a knife than a brutal spike. Triangular blade. Knuckle duster handguard cast from brass. Steel pyramid skull crusher on the pommel. The whole thing's designed for one purpose. Punch through a man's chest and rip him apart. The M1918 follows with a double-edged blade, high-carbon steel blued for night operations. Natural finish wood grip on budget versions. The knuckle duster guard protects your hand and doubles as brass knuckles if you lose the blade. Even the pommel is a weapon. Pyramid-shaped steel designed to crush skulls. These aren't tools. They're purpose-built implements for killing human beings in confined spaces. But the weapon that terrifies the Germans most is American. The Winchester Model 1897 pump-action shotgun, modified for trench warfare with a 20-inch cylinder bore barrel. Perforated steel heat, shield over the barrel so your hands don't burn. Adapter with bayonet lug for fixing an M1917 bayonet. The gun holds 6 shells of double-aught buckshot, 9.33 caliber pellets per shell, 54 pellets total. Effective range up to 50 yards. And here's what makes it devastating. The Model 1897 fires every time the action closes with the trigger depressed. No trigger disconnector. Slam firing. Hold the trigger and pump. A trained soldier can empty all 6 shells in 2 seconds. 54 lead pellets spraying through a trench in the time it takes to blink. Germans call it the trench sweeper, the trench broom. American raiders use it to clear enemy positions in seconds. June 1918, Battle of Belleau Wood. American shotgunners mow down advancing German troops. Captain J. H. Hoskins from an engineering company tells the Nashville Banner that shotgun volley was new to the Germans. Every time a gun fired, 3 or 4 Germans would go down. The more surprised they got, the closer they huddled. The deadlier the fire became. July 21st, 1918. Near Baccarat in France. Germans capture a U.S. soldier from the 307th Infantry Regiment carrying a Winchester Model 97. First time they've seen this weapon, September 11th, near Villers-en-Haye. They capture another American from the 6th Infantry Regiment with the same shotgun. 4 days later, on September 15th, the German government files an official protest through diplomatic channels. The note goes from the Spanish embassy in Berlin to the Swiss embassy to the American legation in Bern, Switzerland. Germany claims the shotgun violates Article 23, Section E of the 1899 and 1907 Hague Conventions, causes unnecessary suffering. They warn that any American captured with a shotgun or shotgun ammunition will be executed. Washington ignores the protest. American newspapers respond with mockery. Germany is the nation that pioneered poison gas warfare, that deploys flamethrowers designed specifically to burn men alive in trenches, that issues sawtooth bayonets to maximize tissue damage, and they're calling the shotgun inhumane. Secretary of State Robert Lansing sends a response. If Germany executes any American soldiers for carrying shotguns, the United States will implement severe reprisals. The threat works. Germany never follows through. No American soldier is executed for possessing a trench gun. But the diplomatic protest shows what these weapons do to human bodies. The Germans aren't complaining about rifles or machine guns. They're terrified of a weapon that turns a man into shredded meat in an enclosed space. That's what trench raids are. Not battles, abattoirs. The raids follow patterns. Most happen between 10 at night and 3 in the morning. Moonless nights are best. Heavy cloud cover, rain, anything that provides darkness. Raiders prepare for days or weeks depending on the scale. Small patrols of 5 to 10 men might go out with minimal preparation. Large raids involving hundreds of soldiers require careful planning, artillery support, rehearsals. Men are selected for physical fitness, courage, and ability to stay calm. Many raids use volunteers, some don't. Officers sometimes order men on raids as punishment. The raiders blacken their faces with burnt cork or mud, darken any equipment that might reflect light, remove all identifying marks from uniforms. No papers, no letters from home. Nothing that gives away their identity or unit if they're captured. Some men carry extra gear, wire cutters, Bangalore torpedoes for blowing gaps in wire, portable bridges for crossing streams or flooded shell craters, signal flares, whistles. Most important are the weapons. Clubs and knives for silent killing, pistols and grenades as backup, shotguns for Americans, Lewis guns for Canadians. Despite their limited ammunition capacity because they're lightweight and effective in hit and run attacks, the raiders move out through gaps cut in their own wire. Sometimes they follow tapes laid earlier by scouts. White tapes are hard to see, so they use lime powder scattered in lines across no man's land, or electric torches with red filters winking from forward positions. Crossing no man's land is the most dangerous part. You're exposed. Moving across broken ground in darkness, trying not to trip over wire or fall into shell craters, trying not to make noise. The enemy has sentries watching, listening posts forward of their main trenches, men with binoculars scanning for movement, flare pistols ready to light up the night, machine gun crews waiting to sweep no man's land with interlocking fire. If a flare goes up while you're crossing, you freeze, don't move, don't breathe. The flare hangs from a small parachute blazing for a minute, long enough for defenders to spot you and open fire. If you're caught halfway across, there's nowhere to hide, no cover, just craters and corpses and wire. The best raiders crawl on their stomachs, inch forward through mud and filth. It takes an hour to cross 200 yards, sometimes longer. You listen for German conversations. Watch for the glow of cigarettes. Sentries get bored, get careless. That's when you strike. Standard practice is to creep up on sentries as quietly as possible, then kill them before they can raise the alarm. A club to the back of the head, a knife across the throat. Quick, silent, brutal. Once the sentries are dead, the raiders have minutes before someone notices. They slip into the trench and spread out. If the objective is prisoners, they grab officers or NCOs, knock them unconscious if they resist, gag them, drag them back. If the objective is killing, they work fast. Grenades down dugouts. Clubs and knives for anyone who comes out. Destroy equipment, wreck communications, set charges on ammunition stores, create maximum chaos in minimum time, then they run, back across no man's land while the enemy wakes up, while flares light the sky. While machine guns open up, while artillery starts to fall, the Germans know the drill too. As soon as a raid is detected, they fire prearranged defensive barrages, box barrages that seal off the raided section and trap the raiders inside. Mortars, Minenwerfers, light guns, heavy guns. Everything they have. The raiders try to get back through the wire before the artillery arrives. Wounded men are supposed to be carried. In practice, many get left behind. Dead for certain get left. There's no time. You grab what prisoners and intelligence you can and you run. If you make it back, you collapse in your own trench. Check who's missing. Count casualties. Hand over prisoners to intelligence officers. Clean your weapons. Try not to think about what you just did. The raids achieve mixed results. Small reconnaissance patrols gather useful intelligence. Identify which enemy units are opposite your position. Locate machine gun nests. Find gaps in wire. Larger raids can capture important documents, maps, code books, orders. Prisoners provide information under interrogation. Sometimes raids destroy valuable equipment or kill key personnel. But the cost in casualties often exceeds the intelligence gained. British officer F. Jourdain questions the point after participating in multiple raids. He describes how generals 30 miles behind the lines send messages ordering raids to capture prisoners, just to identify enemy divisions. As if it matters, Jourdain says the men hate it. They don't mind going over the top with a fair chance in a major attack, but raids announce your intentions. The box barrage tells the enemy exactly where you're hitting. Germans pour everything into that sector. Trench mortars, Minenwerfers, light guns, heavy guns, everything barring the kitchen stove. The casualties are disproportionate to what you gain. Every raid Jourdain hears about involves 3 or 4 officers. 2 get killed. Maybe you capture 1 prisoner. Maybe Albert Birtwistle serves as an NCO. He goes on a raid where even the officer doesn't know the objective. Birtwistle asks what the point is. The officer has no answer. Jerry occupies the target trench at night and abandons it during the day, so they raid an empty position. Birtwistle survives but calls it pointless. Other raids go catastrophically wrong. Bill Smedley participates in a raid near Arras in November 1917. He takes a waterproof ground sheet because it's drizzling. Fatal mistake. They're going under barbed wire, not through gaps. Smedley's sheet snags on wire. Machine guns open up, sweeping fire in the rain. Smedley slips into a shell hole with his sheet stuck above him. The machine gunning lasts 20 minutes. When it stops, Smedley is alone. The rest of his patrol is dead or scattered. He survives by luck. The Germans raid too. Frank Holding serves with the Lancashire Fusiliers. Germans raid his position one night. 5 officers killed in the attack. Germans break through into British trenches. The devastation is total. Frederick Plimmer describes the German raids in 1918. Highly trained soldiers hitting at weak points. If successful, they breach the line and circle around to attack from the rear while their comrades mount a frontal assault. The combination is devastating. German night raids become feared throughout the Allied lines. They're methodical. Professional. Deadly. The psychological toll is immense. Soldiers dread raid duty more than major offensives. In a big attack, everyone goes over together. You have artillery support, comrades on both sides. Some chance of success. Raids are different. Small groups in the dark. You might get killed by your own side in the confusion. You might get captured and executed. You might make it back and be ordered out again tomorrow night. The stress is constant. Every night you're in the line, you know raiders might come. Every patrol into no man's land might be your last. Sleep becomes impossible. Men develop what they call shell shock. Anxiety, depression, nightmares, flashbacks, tremors, inability to relax. Modern medicine calls it post-traumatic stress disorder. In 1914 through 1918, they just call it cowardice and shoot you if you refuse to fight. The physical conditions make it worse. Trenches are filthy, mud everywhere. Water standing in the bottom despite duckboards and drainage ditches. Rats by the thousands feeding on unburied corpses. Lice in your clothes, your hair, under your skin. Diseases spread fast. Trench foot from standing in cold water for days. Your feet swell, skin breaks down, blisters form. Flesh goes numb, fungal infections set in. Gangrene, if it's not treated. Amputation if gangrene spreads. The British record over 20,000 cases of trench foot in winter, 1914 to 1915 alone. Trench mouth, gum infections from stress and poor hygiene. Teeth rot, gums bleed. The pain is constant. Dysentery from contaminated water, cholera, typhoid fever. You're always sick, always exhausted, always terrified. And at night, the raids begin. Commanders justify raids as maintaining offensive spirit, keeping men aggressive and alert, dominating no man's land, gathering intelligence, building confidence through small victories. Some elite units embrace raiding culture. Canadians and Australians develop specialized techniques. They refine tactics, train intensively, build unit cohesion through shared danger. Officers like raids because they provide action during periods of stalemate, break the monotony of trench warfare, give men something to do besides sit in mud waiting to be shelled. But ordinary soldiers see through this. They know raids are often ordered by generals who will never cross no man's land. Staff officers in comfortable chateaux, miles behind the lines, issuing orders for raids without understanding the cost. Men die to capture a single prisoner just so headquarters knows which German regiment is opposite them. Information that usually doesn't matter, doesn't change strategy, doesn't shorten the war. The scale of raiding expands dramatically. In the 4 months before the Battle of Vimy Ridge in April 1917, The Canadian Corps executes 55 separate trench raids. Competition develops between units. Which battalion can capture the most prisoners, cause the most destruction? Units compete for honor. But competition means casualties. A large-scale raid on February 13, 1917 by the 4th Canadian Division involves 900 men, 150 casualties. An even more ambitious raid on March 1st using chlorine gas fails completely. 637 casualties, including 2 battalion commanders and multiple company commanders killed. The raids continue anyway. Nightly between March 20th and April 9th, when the offensive begins. Approximately 1,400 additional Canadian casualties. For what? Intelligence, prisoners, aggressive spirit. The Germans conduct their own raids, smaller than Canadian operations, but effective. March 15th, 1917, 79 Germans raid the 3rd Canadian Division, successfully capture prisoners, cause damage. Both sides bleed each other in the dark. American forces adopt trench raiding after arriving in France. Major Theodore Roosevelt Jr. plans a raid at Cantigny on June 26, 1918 at 3:15 in the morning. Soldiers from the 26th Infantry sweep through German trenches. 33 prisoners. Command post documents. Success. The Americans become effective raiders quickly, but they also learn the cost. Every raid means casualties. Every night mission means men who don't come back. The 1st Division becomes particularly proficient. They train constantly, perfect their techniques, but proficiency doesn't prevent losses. It just makes the killing more efficient. British military authorities view raiding as essential to maintaining morale and combat readiness. But that view comes from the top, from generals and staff officers. Ordinary soldiers have a different perspective. After the war, writers like Herbert Read and Siegfried Sassoon document their experiences with trench raids. Sassoon's accounts in Memoirs of an Infantry Officer are particularly vivid. He describes the tension before a raid, the fear, the violence, the chaos. Sassoon wins the Military Cross for bringing in wounded under fire after a raid in May 1916. He's recommended for the Victoria Cross after capturing a German trench single-handed. His nickname becomes Mad Jack because of his reckless bravery. But even Sassoon comes to question the war's purpose. In July 1917, he writes A Soldier's Declaration, a public statement against the war. He calls it a war of aggression and conquest, says it's being deliberately prolonged by those with power to end it. The statement gets read in the House of Commons. His friend Robert Graves convinces a review board that Sassoon is suffering from shell shock to avoid a court-martial. Sassoon gets sent to Craig-Lockhart War Hospital for treatment. There he meets Wilfred Owen, influences his poetry. Both men capture the horror of trench warfare in their writing, the brutal reality that propaganda conceals. The raids continue right through to 1918. As the war enters its final year, the tactics evolve. Raids become more sophisticated. Combined arms operations with artillery, mortars, machine guns providing covering fire, engineers blow wire, infantry assault, signals coordinate withdrawal. It starts to resemble modern special operations. Small unit tactics refined through years of blood. The Germans developed their own elite assault troops, Stoßtruppen, stormtroopers, specially trained for infiltration and raids. They carry flamethrowers, grenades, light machine guns. They pioneer tactics that will influence warfare for decades. Infiltration, bypassing strong points, exploiting weaknesses, moving fast and hitting hard. These tactics shaped the German spring offensive of 1918. They also influence Allied responses and eventually contribute to breaking the stalemate. But in the trenches, at night, the raids remain brutal, personal, medieval, men killing each other with clubs and knives in the dark. The weapons might include machine guns and grenades, but the core of a trench raid is ancient violence. Hand-to-hand combat in mud and blood. It's not glorious, not noble, just necessary according to the generals who order it, necessary to maintain pressure, gather intelligence, keep the enemy off balance. The men who execute these raids know better. They know it's slaughter, random, horrible, often pointless, but they go anyway, night after night, because orders are orders, because their friends are going, because refusing means execution for cowardice. Because in 1914 through 1918, you don't get to say no. The statistics are incomplete. Exact casualty figures for trench raids specifically don't exist. They get lumped in with general trench warfare casualties. But estimates suggest tens of thousands of men die in these small-scale night operations. Not from artillery, not from machine guns sweeping no man's land during major offensives, from clubs and knives and grenades in the dark, from drowning in flooded shell craters while trying to crawl back to your lines, from being captured and killed before you can be ransomed or exchanged. The raids are a separate war within the war, a nightly campaign of terror that most histories barely mention. Too small to matter individually, too brutal to glorify, too common to seem notable. But add them up, and the raids become their own battle of the Somme, fought in installments, one small horror at a time. The raids affect tactics for the entire war. Lessons learned in night operations influence how armies approach major offensives. The emphasis on surprise, on coordination between infantry and artillery, on using terrain, on speed and violence of action. Canadian success with trench raiding contributes directly to their performance at Vimy Ridge. 4 Canadian divisions attacked together on April 9, 1917. Extensive preparation, underground tunnels, artillery coordination, detailed planning based on intelligence from dozens of raids. The Canadians take the ridge in 3 days. German commanders later say Vimy shows them the war is lost. The tactics that work there trace back to countless night raids. Small-scale operations teaching lessons applied at division level. The cultural impact is harder to measure. Trench raids produce legends, stories that spread through the armies. The wild men of no man's land, deserters from all sides, supposedly living in abandoned trenches and dugouts. Emerging at night to scavenge corpses. Some versions say they're ghoulish beasts feeding on the dead, pure myth growing from the horror of reality. British Lieutenant Colonel Ardern Beeman writes about it in his 1920 memoir, The Squadroon. German prisoners of war vanishing into the ground, wild men living underground like ghouls among the dead, British, French, Australian, German deserters banding together. The tale becomes one of the finest legends of the war, according to historian Paul Fussell, rich in symbolic suggestion. The truth is simpler and worse. Men do live in no man's land sometimes, not deserters, wounded soldiers who crawl into shell craters and can't make it back to their lines. They die slowly over hours or days. Their bodies join thousands of others rotting between the trenches. Rats feed on them. So do the stories. War poets capture the psychological reality. Wilfred Owen writes about no man's land in poems like Dulce et decorum est, mud-filled craters, corpse-strewn fields, the eerie quiet broken by sudden violence. Siegfried Sassoon writes about raids directly. The tension, the fear, the intimate horror of killing men in darkness. These aren't abstract meditations on war. They're specific accounts of specific experiences. Owen dies 1 week before the armistice, killed during a crossing of the Sambre-Oise Canal on November 4, 1918. His mother receives the telegram informing her of his death on November 11, as church bells ring for peace. Sassoon survives. Spends decades processing his experiences through poetry and memoirs. His Schurston trilogy, published from 1928 to 1936, becomes recognized as among the finest accounts of trench warfare ever written. Critics praise its authenticity, its understated horror, its refusal to glorify or condemn. If you value this kind of documented military history, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is based on primary sources from archives published by the Imperial War Museums in their digital collections between 2023 and 2025, the National WWI Museum and Memorial, and military records from the American Battle Monuments Commission. We're using war diaries, soldier testimonies, and official documentation, not speculation. Now back to the information. The innovation in weaponry continues throughout the war. By 1917, armies have learned that specific tools work better for specific tasks. The Americans feel the M1917 trench knife in large numbers. Triangular blade, knuckle duster guard, skull crusher, pommel. The design is brutal but effective. Steel production increases to meet demand. LF and C manufactures thousands of these knives. Some C used through World War II. The design influences combat knife development for decades. The Winchester model 1897 trench gun becomes iconic. Perforated heat shield, bayonet lug, short barrel, slam fire capability. Despite German protests and diplomatic pressure, the Americans continue using it. Production increases. By late 1918, American trench raiders routinely carry shotguns along with pistols and grenades. The psychological effect is as important as the physical damage. German soldiers know what a shotgun does to human bodies at close range. The fear spreads. British and Commonwealth forces develop their own specialized equipment. Push daggers become popular with raiders, despite not being official issue. Robbins of Dudley and other manufacturers produce them commercially. Soldiers buy them with their own money, brass knuckles, improvised clubs, entrenching tools sharpened into blades, anything that gives an edge in close combat. The improvisation shows how personal the killing becomes. These aren't weapons issued by ordnance departments. They're tools individual soldiers create or purchase because they know standard equipment isn't enough. You can't shoot your way through a trench raid. Too loud, too slow. You need something that kills silently and instantly. A club that caves in a skull with one swing. a knife that opens a throat before the victim can scream. This is what modern warfare looks like up close. German weapons evolve too. The Nahkampfmesser remains standard issue, but variations appear, some with longer blades, some with serrated edges, some with reinforced hilts for striking. When Germans encounter French nail stilettos, they respond by converting barbed wire stakes into similar weapons. Pragmatic, brutal, effective. The Germans also developed specialized grenades for trench fighting. Stick grenades with long handles for throwing from cover, egg grenades small enough to carry dozens, potato masher grenades that bounce in confined spaces. The variety shows how seriously all sides take close quarters combat. This isn't improvisation anymore. It's industrial production of medieval weaponry. The American M 1911 pistol becomes legendary in trench raids. 45 caliber automatic, 7 rounds in the magazine plus 1 in the chamber. John Browning's design proves so reliable it remains in service for over 70 years. The stopping power of the 45 ACP round is unmatched. A single hit anywhere on the torso usually puts a man down. American raiders favor it over any other weapon except the shotgun. They carry extra magazines, some carry 2 pistols. The weight doesn't matter when you're fighting in trenches. What matters is having enough ammunition to fight your way out if the raid goes wrong. Lieutenant William Bradford Turner becomes one of the most decorated American trench raiders. September 27, 1918, near Ronsoy, France. Turner leads what starts as a trench raid and escalates into a company-sized attack. 4 lines of German trenches. Turner personally kills at least 16 Germans. Wounded 3 times, he keeps fighting. Killed in the 4th trench line defending against a German counterattack. Medal of Honor awarded posthumously. His citation describes leading a small group under terrific artillery and machine gun fire after they became separated in the darkness. The word terrific doesn't capture it. Turner died fighting with his M1911 while bleeding from multiple wounds. That's what trench raiding produces. Heroes who die in the dark. The raids create a particular kind of soldier, hard, ruthless, comfortable with violence in ways that shock even other combat troops. Men who volunteer for raids again and again develop reputations. Some relish it, the adrenaline, the power, the release of killing without consequence. Others do it out of duty or loyalty to comrades. Some just become numb, go through the motions, kill mechanically, come back. Sleep if you can, go out again tomorrow. The psychological damage accumulates. Shell shock rates among frequent raiders are higher than among regular infantry. Nightmares, flashbacks, violent outbursts, inability to readjust to normal life. Many raiders who survive the war struggle for decades afterward. Some never recover. The intimate violence of trench raids leaves scars that artillery wounds don't. It's one thing to be shelled from a distance, another to crush a man's skull with a club. To feel his bones break under your hands, to see his face in the second before he dies, that stays with you. The Germans fear Canadian raiders more than any others. A German soldier writes in his diary, hoping the Canadians aren't in trenches opposite his position because they jump in the darkest night. The reputation is earned through 4 years of aggressive raiding. Canadians pioneer many techniques that other armies adopt. They use camouflage more effectively, blackened faces and equipment, or dark uniforms. Move silently. They perfect the art of cutting wire without noise, practice infiltration routes repeatedly until every man knows the path by feel. Coordinate with artillery to provide precise covering fire that doesn't hit their own men. The Canadian Corps becomes known as storm troops of the British Empire, elite raiders who can take any objective if properly supported, but the cost in casualties remains brutal. 1,400 men in less than 3 weeks before Vimy, hundreds more in other operations. The Canadians earn their reputation in blood. Night patrols are even more common than full raids. Small groups of 2 to 10 men go out almost every night to gather information, check wire, locate enemy positions, sometimes capture a prisoner if opportunity arises. These patrols are less organized than raids, but equally dangerous. You're crawling through no man's land with minimal support. If you run into an enemy patrol, it becomes a desperate fight in the dark. Men grapple with knives and bare hands. Sometimes both patrols are wiped out, sometimes one side retreats. Sometimes they pass within yards of each other in the darkness and never know. The stress of night patrols is cumulative. Every sound makes you freeze. Every shadow might be the enemy. You strain your eyes until they ache. Listen until tiny noises become magnified 100-fold. A rat sounds like a man crawling. A rabbit scuttling through grass sounds like a whole patrol. Your nerves fray. Your judgment falters. Men shoot at shadows, throw grenades at nothing. Alert the enemy to your position for no reason. The fear feeds on itself. Sentries have it worst. You stand in the front line knowing that raiders might come any night, might already be in no man's land crawling toward you. You watch through periscopes, scan with binoculars, listen. German sentries know the Canadians are coming eventually, just don't know when. The anticipation is torture. Some sentries crack, shoot at nothing, waste flares. Officers punish them for cowardice, but fear isn't something you control. It accumulates until you're useless, until you're dangerous to your own side, until you volunteer for a daylight raid just to escape the nightly terror of sentry duty. That's how bad it gets. The broader impact on the war is complex. Raids do provide intelligence, unit identifications, defensive positions, wire layouts, mine locations. That information saves lives in major offensives. The raids at Vimy Ridge prove this. Canadian intelligence built from dozens of raids gives commanders detailed knowledge of German defenses. When the assault begins on April 9th, the Canadians know exactly what they're facing. Where the machine guns are positioned, which sectors are weak, where to concentrate artillery. The Ridge falls in 3 days with relatively low casualties for such a major objective. 11,000 Canadian casualties against German losses, estimated around 20,000. In World War I terms, that's a victory. The raids contributed, but was the contribution worth the 1,400 casualties in the weeks before, plus hundreds more in earlier operations? The arithmetic of war doesn't balance that way. You can't subtract raid casualties from assault casualties and claim you came out ahead. The men who died in raids are dead. The men who died in the assault are dead. Adding their corpses together doesn't create meaning. The raids do affect morale in contradictory ways. Some units embrace raiding culture, build cohesion through shared danger, develop pride in their capabilities. Officers report improved alertness and aggression. Men feel empowered instead of passive, but other units hate it. See raids as pointless bloodletting ordered by distant commanders. Morale craters, resentment builds. The difference seems to depend on leadership, unit culture, and whether the raids achieve visible results. A successful raid that captures valuable intelligence and suffers minimal casualties can boost morale. A failed raid with heavy casualties for no gain destroys it. The problem is, you can't predict outcomes. No matter how well you plan, chance plays a huge role. Wire that wasn't cut properly. A sentry who stays alert instead of dozing. Artillery that arrives 30 seconds late. Any of these can turn success into disaster. Men know this. The randomness makes it worse. You can do everything right and still die because of bad luck. That knowledge corrodes confidence. The transformation of warfare happens in these raids. Medieval combat merges with industrial killing. Men fight with clubs and knives backed by machine guns and artillery. Individual courage matters, but so does logistics and coordination. The raids force armies to develop combined arms tactics on a small scale. Infantry, working with engineers, working with artillery, working with intelligence, all coordinated for a 20-minute operation. The skills learned here transfer to larger operations. By 1918, armies have figured out how to break the trench stalemate. Tanks, aircraft, improved artillery, better communications, infiltration tactics, stormtrooper methods. All of it grows from lessons learned in small-scale raids. The 100 Days Offensive that ends the war uses these tactics at operational level. Mobile warfare returns. The trenches become obsolete, but getting to that point required 4 years of experimentation paid for in casualties. The night raids were part of that experimentation, a very expensive part. As the war ends in November 1918, the raiding finally stops. The armistice takes effect at 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month. Soldiers on both sides emerge from trenches. Some shake hands across no man's land, others just walk away. The war is over. The killing stops, except it doesn't really stop. Men carry it with them. The memories, the trauma, the skills they learned for surviving by killing. Many raiders struggle to readjust to civilian life. They've spent years learning to be efficient murderers. How do you turn that off? How do you work a normal job when you've crushed men's skulls with clubs? How do you sleep when you see their faces every time you close your eyes? Some manage, build new lives, suppress the memories. Others can't. Drink themselves to death, die by suicide, drift into violence and crime. The war continues in their minds decades after the trenches are filled in. The legacy of trench raiding influences military doctrine going forward. Special operations forces trace lineage to these raiders. The emphasis on small unit tactics, night operations, specialized weapons, and intensive training all come from World War I raid experience. The British commandos of World War II used similar tactics. American Rangers, German Fallschirmjäger, Soviet naval infantry. Modern special forces around the world employ techniques refined in the trenches of France and Belgium. The weapons evolve, but the principles remain. Surprise, speed, violence of action, close quarters combat expertise. Psychological warfare through reputation. These concepts originated in trench raids. The brutalizing experience of 1914 through 1918 created templates for organized violence that persist to this day. But the human cost gets forgotten. The trench raids don't have monuments. No memorials specifically honor the men who died crawling through no man's land with blackened faces and medieval weapons. They're subsumed into the larger casualty figures, the millions who died in the Great War. Individual stories disappear. James Gresham, Thomas Enright, Merle Hay. The three Americans killed at Ericourt on November 3, 1917. They're commemorated, but not for how they died, not for the specific horror of being overrun in darkness by German raiders with clubs and knives. The official narrative speaks of sacrifice and duty. It doesn't mention throats cut in the dark, skulls crushed, bodies left in trenches. That's too ugly, too brutal, too medieval for the modern war we claim to have fought. The same pattern repeats across all armies. Individual raiders are honored if they perform acts of conspicuous gallantry. Medals awarded, names in dispatches. But the routine raids, the nightly patrols, the grinding accumulation of casualties, that gets lost. The men who went out 30 times and came back 29 and died on the 30th. They're statistics, not heroes, not martyrs, just casualties of a war that consumed millions. Their specific method of death becomes irrelevant in the larger accounting, but it wasn't irrelevant to them. In the moment when a German club connected with a British skull, when a Canadian knife slid between French ribs, when an American shotgun blast shredded a German patrol, in those moments the method mattered absolutely. It was everything. The last thing you experienced before darkness. And here's what gets buried deepest. Archived in military records nobody reads. A French archaeological survey conducted in the 1990s. They're examining the old trench systems near Arras, looking for unexploded ordnance, clearing ground for development. The survey team finds an anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar shows a mass of metal objects clustered in a filled-in section of trench. They excavate carefully. What they find? 37 bodies in a space 20 feet long, British and German mixed together. All showing evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. Knife wounds between ribs, bayonet punctures, close-range gunshot wounds. The position of the bodies suggests they died fighting each other in confined space. A raid that went wrong, or maybe went right, depending on how you measure. Both sides suffered total casualties. The Germans who went over didn't make it back. The British who defended didn't survive to report. Somehow, this section of trench got filled in with all 37 bodies still inside, buried by artillery, or deliberately concealed. The archaeology report published in 1997 suggests this is a microcosm of trench raiding. Small scale, intimate, mutual slaughter with medieval weapons, then buried and forgotten. That's the truth of night trench raids. Not glory, not victory. Just darkness and killing and shallow graves that nobody marked. The horror wasn't the scale. The Somme killed 60,000 British soldiers on the first day. Verdun consumed hundreds of thousands over months. The horror of trench raids was the intimacy. Looking into a man's eyes as you killed him, feeling his breath stop, washing his blood off your hands, then doing it again tomorrow night, and the next night, and the night after that, until the war ended or you died, whichever came first. For 4 years, men crawled through darkness to murder each other with clubs. That's World War I. That's what they don't show you in the films.